My name is James Pierce. I've worn this badge for nearly 20 years, but some places, they leave a different mark. I wasn't supposed to be working. The trip to Anchorage was meant to be a quiet break, a pause from the rot that festers in cities. A friend of mine, Jameson, runs search and rescue up near Barrow, on the northern edge. He said I needed fresh air and cold wind, and God, he was right. At least I thought so. It started with a call at 3:42 a.m. He was out on a job. An oil company outpost had gone dark. Nothing big, just missed check-ins. But he wanted company on the chopper ride up, and I didn't sleep well in the cold anyway. We reached the outpost just after sunrise. 6 structures, surrounded by white nothing. The sun barely touched the horizon. The place felt drained. That's the best word for it. As if the cold wasn't just outside, but had crept into the walls and hollowed out the place. No signs of struggle. No signs of anything, really. 5 workers assigned here, 3 men, 2 women. Equipment was left on, coffee still warm in 1 mug. The outer door to the comms hut was wide open, but there were no tracks in the snow. None leaving, none approaching. Jameson didn't like it. Neither did I. We split up, checked the buildings one by one. I entered the sleeping quarters. 4 beds slept in, 1 neatly made. The one nearest the window was soaked, not with blood, water. The mattress dripped as I leaned in. And then I saw it, ice on the inside of the window. Not frost. Ice, thick and jagged, like something had clawed at it from within. I stepped outside to call for Jameson. He wasn't responding. His radio crackled with static, then silence. I followed his tracks toward the main generator shack. That's when I saw them. New tracks. Not his. Not boot prints. Something wider, flatter. Like something heavy had dragged itself across the snow, leaving a long, shallow trail. I should have turned back. The trail led behind the outpost, down into a small depression between the hills. As I crested the rise, I saw the hole. A perfect circle, no more than 5 feet wide, carved clean through the permafrost. Blackness below. No ladder. Just a vertical descent into the cold. Jameson's boot lay by the edge. I called out. My voice didn't echo, didn't travel. It just stopped. I waited 5 minutes, then tied a rope to the snowcat, hooked myself in, and began to descend. The walls were frozen smooth. 40 feet down, the rope slackened beneath me, open space. I dropped the last few feet and landed hard. What I saw down there made me forget the cold. It was man-made, or something made. The cavern was vast and shaped like a ribcage. Arched, organic, impossible. Strange markings lined the walls, pulsing faintly beneath the ice. And there were sounds, like whispering, but without voices, like breath caught in the lungs of the earth. And there was Jameson. He stood in the center of the chamber, his back to me. His arms hung loose, hands pale, fingertips blue. He whispered something I couldn't make out. When I touched his shoulder, he collapsed, cold, alive barely. But something was wrong. His eyes were open, but they weren't seeing. His mouth moved, but no words came. I dragged him back to the rope and started the ascent. Halfway up, the rope jerked once, then again. I didn't look down. Whatever was beneath us, it wasn't done. We made it back to the surface. The storm had rolled in, thick snow, cutting winds. I sealed the outpost doors and lit every lamp I could find. Jameson still hadn't spoken a word, but he was breathing. At midnight, I found a note inside my coat pocket. I hadn't put it there. It read, "Do not return. We are not asleep. We are waiting." And below that, drawn in black ink, the same sigil I'd seen beneath the ice. This case isn't over. Not yet. I didn't sleep that night. Not that I expected to. Not after what I saw down there. I kept a fire going in the mess hall stove, though it barely cut the cold. Jameson lay wrapped in every blanket we could find, but he didn't move. His breathing was shallow, steady, but his eyes stayed open. They were fixed on the far wall. Around 3:15 a.m., he finally blinked. Then his lips parted, and a word escaped. A single syllable, barely audible. "Below." I leaned in closer. "What's below, Jameson?" He didn't answer. His pupils were dilated, glassy, as if he were still stuck in whatever nightmare waited in that cavern. I grabbed a notepad, shoved it into his hand. "Write it. His fingers shook violently as they formed each letter. It saw me. We needed to leave, but the storm had sealed us in. The radio tower was dead, generator failing, and the snowcat wouldn't start. It was like the cold had crept into the machines themselves, freezing more than just metal. I did one final sweep of the buildings, hoping for anything: an old beacon, backup batteries, flares. In the tool shed behind the generator shack, I found something stranger instead. A journal, wrapped in oilcloth, hidden under a panel in the floorboards. The first pages were old, dated over 50 years ago. They were written by someone named Lars Holten, a Norwegian geologist stationed here during early oil prospecting surveys. What he described wasn't just frost and drilling reports. Found the first structure below the third borehole, he wrote. Walls like bone, symbols that make my skin feel wrong. My men refuse to go deeper. They whisper about dreams, about teeth in the snow. I flipped forward. The handwriting got worse. Slanted, hasty, unstable. The markings glow at night, not with light, with something older, something wrong. One of the crew disappeared yesterday. We found his coat. No blood, just frozen steam, hanging in the air like breath. The final entry was a single sentence, written over and over across 2 pages. They are the silence beneath the world. I dropped the book. When I returned to the mess hall, Jameson was sitting up, awake, breathing harder. He looked at me, pupils huge and black. You went down there, he said, his voice rough. You heard them too. I nodded slowly. What are they? He didn't answer, just shook his head and pointed at the stove. They don't like the fire. The lights flickered again. The stove cracked loudly, and for a moment, I swore the shadows in the corner shifted, stretched. We had to get up before nightfall. By morning, the wind had settled enough to try the snowcat again. I spent 40 minutes warming the battery with a propane torch. It sputtered, groaned, then roared to life. We were out of time. We loaded Jameson in the back, wrapped and sedated. I strapped the journal to my chest and took one last look at the outpost. The snow had shifted again, and the hole, the perfect circle, was gone, buried, or sealed. The drive back was silent. I tried the radio halfway through the journey. Static, then a voice. Faint, familiar. It was mine, repeating the same words over and over. We are not asleep. We are waiting. I shut the radio off. We reached Barrow by sunset. Jameson was taken to the hospital. I gave a report, stripped of every truth, every impossible detail. I left out the hole, the chamber, the whispers, and the sigil that was now burned into the inside of my eyelids. But I kept the journal. I thought it was over, until I opened my suitcase in Anchorage 2 nights later and found something inside it that hadn't been there before. A piece of frozen glass, with a fingerprint on it. Mine. Anchorage was supposed to be a brief stopover before flying back to the mainland. But after what I found in my suitcase, I knew I wasn't going anywhere. The shard of glass, or ice, I still couldn't tell, was dense, heavier than it should have been, cold to the touch, but it never melted. I stared at the fingerprint embedded on its surface. The whorls and ridges were unmistakably mine, but reversed, like a negative impression. I set it on the desk of the motel room, stared at it for an hour. The more I looked, the more it seemed to hum. Not audibly, it resonated in the air around it, as if reality grew thin in its presence. I locked it in the hotel safe and booked another night. The dreams returned that night, but not as dreams, as memories. I stood again at the edge of the underground chasm, except this time, I didn't hold a flashlight. I held something else, a key made of dark stone. The walls of the cavern weren't ancient structures. They pulsed like flesh, veins glowing with that same pale light from the symbols. Voices whispered in a language I didn't recognize, but understood. Return. Bring what was lost. You carry the mark. I awoke drenched in sweat, the motel clock blinking 3:33 a.m. Something was pulling me back. By morning I decided I needed answers. I contacted a colleague from my bureau days, Agent Kessler, retired, but still had access to deep archives. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to raise an eyebrow. She called me back after 2 hours. You sure you want to go down this rabbit hole, Pierce? I've already gone down, I said. I need to know what it is. She sighed, then said, there are rumors. Old classified files from Cold War expeditions. Some say certain Arctic sites were sealed off, not because of military activity, but anomalies. Places where compass readings failed, where geology contradicted itself. One site in particular was blacked out in all logs, codenamed Null Sleep. She sent me a scanned document, blurry, redacted, but the coordinates matched the abandoned station I'd just left. And one word stood out, scrawled by hand on the final page. Containment failed. I returned to the station. I knew how that sounded. Reckless, suicidal. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the case wasn't just unfinished. It was active. I reached the outpost by Snowcat again. The weather was clearer, skies sharp and pale. Everything was just as I'd left it, except for one thing. The hole was open again. This time, I descended with more than a flashlight. I brought a flare gun, climbing gear, and a recorder. I clipped a trail line to the surface and went down. The walls still pulsed faintly, but now they felt alert, aware. I reached the chamber. The symbols along the wall shimmered faintly, and the air was thick, like walking underwater. The center of the room had changed. There was now a pedestal, and on it, the same shard I'd found in my suitcase, but another copy. As I stepped closer, the room shifted. The sigils lit up in sequence, one by one, like a circuit coming alive, and then the whispers returned, clearer this time. The gate must remain closed, but the mark opens. You opened it. Suddenly, the ice beneath my feet cracked. A shape began to rise, not a creature, not exactly. A convergence of shadows and bone, teeth without form, eyes where there shouldn't be any. It hovered inches above the floor, held back only by a flickering ring of fire along the perimeter, remnants of the flare I'd dropped earlier. It couldn't cross it. I pulled the flare gun. My hand trembled, heart pounding. But something instinctual held me back from shooting. I didn't know what a flare to the thing would do, what it might wake up. Instead, I backed away slowly, matching the thing's movements. It whispered again, directly into my mind. 1 shard seals. 2 shards open. 3 awaken. I made it out. Barely. Back in Anchorage, I delivered both shards to a secure bureau facility, under false pretense, claiming them as unidentified artifacts for analysis. They were stored in separate lead-lined containers. I don't know if it was enough. Jameson never spoke again. He remains institutionalized, sometimes scribbling symbols onto napkins with no ink. The outpost was buried again, not by me, but by an avalanche 2 weeks later. Or so the reports claim. The truth? Something wanted it sealed. I reviewed the audio from the recorder I brought down there. At first, it was just static, but buried in the background, around the 47-minute mark, there was a low, rhythmic sound, a bell, ringing from somewhere deep beneath the earth, calling something. And that's where the case ends, for now. But sometimes at night I still hear it, the silence beneath, ringing.